Welcome back. This time on Whiskey 101, I want to talk about the differences between whiskeys. Bourbon, Scotch, Irish whiskey. What are the differences and why does it matter? So, the only reason it matters is for you to understand what it is you're buying. For me, whenever I was first starting out on my journey, I didn't necessarily understand the difference. I knew Irish whiskey was made in Ireland and Scotch was made in Scotland, but beyond that, didn't really understand. And so, I'd be at the store and be like, oh, well, I don't know if I like this. What is this? And so I'm hoping that by, breaking down the differences, that it might give you, arm you with a little bit of information to make more informed decisions at the store. So, but first, understand that there's not one style of whiskey that is better than the other. Some people will tell you that because there's Team Bourbon, Team Scotch, Team Irish, and so forth. But really, it comes down to what you like best, and for me, it all depends on what mood I'm in. Two, even within a particular category of whiskey doesn't make one better than the other. The best whiskey is the one you like. So that's very important to remember for me. And then third is, price is not the sole judge of quality. There's some great whiskeys available that won't break the bank. Price is typically an indication of rarity, not quality. So, okay, with that out of the way, let's kind of jump in, right? So bourbon. And we're going to dive deeper into each of these specific whiskey categories later on, so I'm just going to give it kind of a high level. So first of all, they're all whiskey, right? They're just different styles of whiskey. So bourbon has to be made in America. The grain recipe or mash bill that make up the whiskey has to be at least 51% corn. It's got to be aged in new charred oak barrels, bottled at no less than 80 proof, distillation proof cannot be any higher than 160, and the barrel entry proof can be no higher than 125. All right, that's a lot of geek talk to say that bourbon has to be made in America. It's 51% corn aged in new charred oak barrels. Means it's going to be a little sweeter. It's going to, some people call it a little rougher spirit. It's going to have your general characteristics of vanillas, caramels, the oak from the barrel. All right, so Scotch, clearly it's got to be made in Scotland. It's got to be distilled, aged at least 3 years, and bottled in Scotland in order for it to be called Scotch. But Scotch can vary widely because we have, 5 regions of Scotland, all producing various flavor profiles, from your peated Islas like Lagavulin 16 to your really nice floral and fruity Speysides in the Dalmore. And then there's single malts, blended malts, blended Scotch, single grain, blended grain. There's these different types of Scotches that are all going to maintain a different flavor profile, but looking at single malts as the specific part of Scotch that we're talking, because it's the most popular right now, is that you're going to get a nuttiness, kind of a grain sweetness to it. Now, depending on the region, you could get a lot of smoke and peat. Note, not all Scotch is peaty. So if you don't like Scotch because what you've been introduced to is like a Lafroy or Lagavulin, try to look for something on a label that says it's from the Speyside Highland region, Dalmore, Macallan, that focus on a sherry cask finishing. They're going to give you a lot more dried fruits and sweetness to it. But single malts are not exclusive to Scotland. They're just not called Scotch anywhere else. So single malts are being produced all over the world. And depending on the region they're in, have their own requirements they have to meet in order to receive that designation. So, but for the most part, it's 100% malted barley, distilled in a pot still, that type of thing. So these are going to kind of give you those same characteristics profiles as a single malt Scotch, with variances depending on the region as well. But note that they're going to usually probably be sometimes lighter in texture. They're a great way to entry into it, and there's a lot of range and flavor profiles that can exist. Another popular one that's really making a comeback is rye whiskey. So it's typically found in America, where the primary grain used in the mash bill or the grain recipe is rye. And what that's going to produce is typically a little bit spicier whiskey. I found that you either really love them or you hate them, one of the two. There's not a lot of in between there. But, so at one time it was the most popular whiskey in America, and then Prohibition and other factors led to a downslide. But with the craft cocktail movement, it's coming back because it can really withstand the ingredients and make beautiful cocktails. So Irish whiskey, again, it's got to be made in Ireland. They're making all kinds of styles of whiskey too, from single malts to blendeds. But one thing that's unique about Irish whiskey is the Irish pot still, which uses a combination of malted and unmalted barley to give it this really distinct and unique flavor profile. For me, I get a lighter whiskey in Irish, almost kind of sugar cookie, fresh grains, that type of thing is what I pick up in Irish. So, and then there's Canadian whiskey, which is actually kind of a complex process and unique to itself, is that they actually will distill and age separately a blending whiskey and a flavoring whiskey. And then before bottling, they will blend them together to create these different whiskeys. I think it's such a cool and fun way to do it that it gives the blender so much flexibility in creating unique and wonderful whiskey flavors. So don't knock Canadian. It's worth giving it a shot, especially if you're looking at the shelf and you're finding it. However, they do typically use rye grains, and so they may have a little bit of spicy characteristic as well. But they're also they're like a spicy sweet almost, and they're usually lighter in flavor. So, all right, let's recap. So bourbon, it's going to give you your sweetness, your vanillas, your caramels. Some people consider it a little rougher because of the oak, from the charred, new charred oak barrel. Scotch, depending on the region, you can have this really, light floral, sweet malted whiskey to a really smoky peaty with hints of the citrus and stuff like that in it. So depending on what you're looking for determines the region you're looking for. Single malts can be made anywhere, and again, kind of like that, depending on the flavor you're looking for. Each one's going to have its own characteristics. Rye whiskey is typically going to have a little bit more black pepper spice to it. Irish whiskey, very light, kind of a soft sweetness to it, and fresh grains and a little bit of citrus to it for me. And then Canadian whiskey is going to have that kind of sweet, spicy kind of flavor, also being lighter in texture as well. So I hope that gives you an idea of how each of the styles differ from each other, besides the technical aspects of it. But within each category, there's an array of flavor profiles, right? Not all bourbon is the same. Not all Scotch is the same. Not all Canadian's the same. So explore, find what excites you, and we'll dive deeper into each of the different categories at a later time. But until next time, cheers.